Welcome to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fauscette. Each week we interview experts in AI, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. Welcome. In our show today, we look at orchestrating innovation, AI's role in empowering knowledge workers. I'm joined by Asim Rizvi, founder and CEO of Momba AI. Asim, welcome.
Hey, how are you, man?
I'm well, thanks. Good to see you. Could you just do a quick introduction for the audience and then just tell us a little bit about Momba AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been around the technology and innovation space for a very long time. Spent a lot of time in financial services focusing on that, and then built the largest ISV on the ServiceNow ecosystem called Nuvolo together with other founders. That was a very successful venture. Have been interested in the AI space and digging into it for a very long time, and had the opportunity to actually build Momba from scratch. And here we are doing that. Momba's core proposition is to use agentic AI and create knowledge universes for our customers to be able to automate and make knowledge work much more efficient. So the tagline that we go with is, we fold space between you and successful outcomes, using agentic AI. And it's a very interesting concept because finally, we feel now we have the technology frameworks and capabilities available from an AI perspective to really be able to make that statement. Because, in the past, we've built a lot of SaaS software and often said things like, we'll make it more efficient and we'll save you cost and, we'll make you more compliant and, we'll have the best, most efficient process. And we'll talk more about this stuff. But, just to say in short, we actually feel like now, the path to outcomes is not always a straight line, a linear line, is actually folding space. And that's what we're focused on.
Nice. Well, so we'll jump into agentic AI in a little bit, and that's definitely, as hot a topic as it is, definitely something that I want to go through with you. But I'd like to start somewhere a little earlier in this. We were talking before about this concept of AI value tiers. So, could you talk a little bit about that and what trends, changes do you see at each tier, hardware, language model, application? And why do you think the app layer is so promising?
Yeah, I just saw an article. I can't remember the author right now, but I just saw an article literally about this right after our conversation. I was like, hey, I should have written that article. But it's very interesting. So, as the trend goes, what gets commoditized, what doesn't get commoditized, right? So obviously, NVIDIA's got a huge lead on hardware, right? I think there's still a huge amount of innovation to be done on the hardware side. In another conversation you and I had, we talked about how software is going to leap hardware, and that possibly there's going to be a friction, right, around this over the next 10 years. Because at some point, how many data centers with how much power can you actually really run to power the world of AI, right? But I think, so there's a lot of innovation opportunity in the hardware space, which means there's a lot of value creation opportunity in the hardware space. We have one big provider, right? And that's the first the bottom tier, right? We have one big provider. We have one big chip manufacturer, right, sitting in Taiwan. And they own the market, right? They absolutely own the market right now. But this isn't something that other people are not going to figure out. It's just a matter of time of how good they'll get to it, right? So the second and third runner in hardware is going to be able to create value, is going to be able to diversify the market. So there's value in that tier, right? Then you talk about LLMs, right? So the LLM tier is beyond GPU is really, really important, because if you think about the 7 big providers of LLMs, and every month another perfectly trained on something very specific LLM thing comes out, right? It's a bit of a race to the bottom, because the transaction cost is declining from where it was when ChatGPT first came on the horizon to where it is now. Right. Capability. So the transaction cost is declining. The capabilities are going up, right? So this is a commoditization trend, right? And I think that's great for people like us who are actually innovators from a business use case perspective, right?
Yep.
And that's where the third. So I think that layer is going to continue to commoditize. It's great for us. it's almost going to be I feel like in 5 years from now, maybe even sooner, it's going to be much more like utility. It's like water, right? Like it's just there, right? And then what you do with it is what actually matters. And that's where the application layer is. So a lot of the future innovation, especially with the agentic frameworks that have come out in the last year or two, and all the graph and RAG capabilities that actually are now available, the application tier is where the value is, right? And how do you capture that value? So Mamba is trying to do that as well, like create value by folding space, between knowledge workers and the outcomes they're trying to deliver. Make them make them more the orchestrator versus the piano player, right? Raise their level of capability in various ways, and that's where the value is going to get created. Because I firmly believe that we're not the only one who's going to figure out, oh, like by doing this, and this, possibly at an application layer or a platform layer for the enterprise, I can actually create tremendous value in terms of very specific things that are going on. And you see a lot of software out there. Some of it is widgety, right? Like it does one thing, it does it really well, but that's all it does. And
Right.
it's almost like a capability that will really be part of a platform, right? But I think as more people get used to agentic AI in terms of understanding and adoption over the next year or so, and it's going to be fast, and as platforms like Mamba and Writer is another great example, right? Sort of leverage that to really create value in the enterprise. Writer's been doing it for a while. I've been watching their story. It's that's where the value creation will occur. That's where the innovation opportunity is. So that's sort of my view on that topic.
No, it makes sense. I mean, I just published a report yesterday on language models, and if I published that report a year ago, I would have talked about one thing: large language models, right?
Right.
But instead, I talked through about small language models and medium language models, and then some specialty ones like large action models, or this new one that I just wrote about, large behavioral models. So there's a lot of things happening there, but it's either very specialized or a race to the bottom from a commoditization perspective. So that makes sense to me. And then the other thing you said, which I think is really interesting in the application layer, because there was this big buzz for a little while about, oh, we're going to have to teach everybody to be a prompt engineer. And what we've seen is that's not true. The application does that for the bulk of the population. Yes, it's useful to know how to be a prompt engineer if you're going to use the chatbot and language model directly. But if you're just trying to do something, you've got an application for that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm addicted to AI videos on YouTube, right? And it's very interesting. I watch a lot of videos where somebody is giving a chat GPT demo or use case with, hey, I created this prompt, and then I did this, and I did this, and I did that. Okay, that's great. Now let's take that and play that against the millions and millions and millions of knowledge workers in the world, right? Knowledge workers being people who work with knowledge in one way or the other, perform a role that requires knowledge, that has innate knowledge, that creates IP or outcomes. And for them to figure that out for every interaction they're going to have with AI, it's impossible to believe that that's going to happen really fast, because it is like literally there was a video where it was the ChatGPT folks using 4.0 and actually sort of talking about how people don't use these parts of ChatGPT they could use to do all these things that they don't even know about, right? So the underestimation of capability, right? And that happens because at the end of the day, a chat window is a chat window. It's kind of like searching on Google in 2004. Like you did your best to construct a search that got you the right answers from the web. And then Google got smarter and smarter and got better at understanding your search and so on and so forth. But eventually, at the end of the day, you have to get smarter at that. And there's people still that don't know how to search in Google as well as other people. So 24 years in, right? And it's still a struggle from a user experience point of view at the end of the day. You could do searches where you get nothing but ads, and then you get nothing valuable, and you can do searches where you get exactly what you want. So that's just search. Like, so imagine like multiplying that problem by 15x when you get to chat, right? Actual contextual conversation. So all that to say, and I've said this in other conversations with you, the approach that we're taking as well, there has to be a human-centric approach to user experience
Mm.
that allows people to not worry about the prompt as much until they opt into that complexity.
Right.
That should be available, but it should be something they have to opt into as
Yeah.
complexity, and most of the work is done for them. And that's actually the approach we're taking in
Mm.
Mamba as well. Makes
Yeah.
total sense.
Yeah, to me, it's a logical thing. Because if you think about work, it happens in a process across some period of time, and you're doing some different steps that you do fairly often. There are
Yeah.
exceptions to that when you might actually need to go ask the model something specific, but in general, that's not how your work flows, right? And
No.
and so to
Yeah.
me, that's the way that most people will use AI. They may not even have any idea they have AI. They just know they do this thing and this is how they do it, and it
Yeah.
works, right?
I mean, number one rule of user experience design. Well, not number one rule. I'm not a accredited UX designer, but I've done a lot of UX related work and led a lot of people who've done amazing work around that space in my past and today. But we talk about these things like clicks to completion, like getting there fast, right, for the
Yep,
user. And
yep.
really, like, the concept that always sticks with me, and it's a simplicity concept actually, but is opt-in complexity. And right now it's forced complexity
Mm,
with chat, right?
right.
And like there's actual modes and differentiation in removing that forced complexity, right? So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big part of the opportunity that you're talking about with applications,
Hmm.
right?
Besides
Well,
all the other things you can do to make things better, right? Outcomes
yeah.
better.
Yeah, makes sense. So let's move to agentic AI for a bit, agentic applications, because I I think that's a really interesting area, and obviously something that really has exploded over the last 6 months. But could you just give us a bit of an explanation on what does that mean, and Lego blocks and agents approach? How is that pivotal to the future that you see for AI and applications?
Yeah. So, I talk to a lot of companies, some of our customers, some of our partners. Many are just interested in what we're doing, and we're talking to them about them. And they might be, our customers in the future, or just, sharing with folks in the industry, like
Mhm.
what they are seeing. And I'll give you an example of services companies. Every single services company, every single enterprise company as well that I talk to is trying to figure out, with the advent of agentic AI, how they can use it. And if you sort of go to them and go like, so what are you doing with? Well, we're trying this and we're trying it here. We've got this little thing here, but we're really not an agentic AI software
Mhm.
company. We're really not like, we are gonna do some things, but they're all gonna be widgety stuff, right?
Right.
So the first thing they actually have is, very interestingly, what I notice is a bit of fear. And the
Mm,
fear is kind of like the fear I had when I got my first computer science problem in college.
mm,
And I was like, so like, how do I start? Right? The how do I start fear, which is, how do like, it's racing so fast. How do I even, like, I don't know how to get on this train. And really what I need to know is how to drive this train to make my
yeah,
organization competitive. Right. Um, and that's where I think, this application tier where people can create value
mm,
for them that they can buy, right, is gonna matter more. And that's what I'm seeing a lot of there. As soon as they hear that somebody is doing that for them, and that's what they're gonna do 24/7, versus them having to solve this problem and solve
mm,
problems solved for them, they're immediately attracted to that.
yeah,
And I think that's what you're gonna see a lot in terms of not just fear-based, but many folks are innovation-based looking at that. Many folks are looking at that as a competitive advantage, right? Everybody's like knows that there's a rocket ship and they just don't know how to get on it.
yeah,
And like, how do I get on it? But then once like I'm on it, kind of like the Game of Thrones dragon thing, how do I not fall off?
yeah, yeah,
Right? Right? When
exactly.
it's taking a dive or going straight up. So a lot of analogies we could put together on that, but really the
Mm,
core is, The team that I see across enterprise CEOs that I talk to and enterprise services CEOs that I talk to and companies, the chief digital officers, all of these roles is how do I do this in a sustainable manner? How do I introduce organizational change into my company? But what they don't say is like, hey, this is like a fad. This is something that, we'll focus on when we have time. It's like top of their agenda, board level, right?
Yep.
But it's a problem they don't know necessarily always how to start on. Obviously, technology companies have a little bit more of a leg up because they know technology, but not everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the movement from, applications that were and we got excited about generative AI for a good reason. Obviously other types of AI we've been using for years, but if you think about this thing that generates content or pictures or videos or whatever, that was exciting. But to me, this move in the last 6 months to say, and by the way, it can do this for you or it can do that for you. So eventually you get
Yes.
to this power of multiplying my everyday activities so that it's doing things that I would have had to do on my own before to free me up to do other things. I mean, that's exciting.
That is exciting. And so going back to your Lego blocks part of your
Mhm.
question, right? This is one of those things where I am, we're a little bit stealth mode at Mamba right now, so I'm trying to answer your question without giving too much away. But but if you think about it, there's a platform. Writers taking that approach in a different way. We're taking a platform approach as well, where we did that for a reason, because you can always create one little widget and go and get PLG sales and all that fun stuff. We're taking a long sustained approach to say like, well, that one thing, right? For example, generating charts, right? Well, you can go to ChatGPT and generate a chart now if you give it an Excel file, but what
Right.
about doing it consistently for the enterprise in the branded way that it needs to happen, where the
Mhm.
experience is always the same and it's simplified for the user? Well, how do you do that? There's a lot of innovation in the application tier and the platform tier that goes on top of that to actually make that
Right.
happen. That's the approach we're taking. Like recording your Zoom or doing this or doing that. Those are just components of the capabilities of a platform that's built on top of agentic AI. Those are the Lego blocks. Now, comes the next step. The hardest step is, well, I could build these Lego blocks. Those are the technical components. Almost call them services, right? You call them, they do this thing and they do it well. You give them the data, you do RAG, all that fun stuff. And you do RAG techniques
Mhm.
that are like, you innovate on.
Yeah.
And however, when it comes to the user experience, right? How do you then take all that away from the user experience as complexity and just make it like, oh, like press the button here. The button pops up when it's supposed to pop up,
Yeah.
right? Right? Or you are actually in a chat interaction and you say that, but it comes the things that you get suggested to you have considered all these Lego blocks and put the best approach together for you. That's where again, that's a different approach to the innovation on top of it. And I'm hoping other people are going to do this as well. But I feel like this is where we can innovate a lot, and that's sort of the taking the Lego blocks and putting them into this actual user experience
Mhm.
with IP around it that does this well, right? Is
Yeah.
going to be interesting.
Yeah, that I mean, that is interesting. And, you mentioned earlier this idea of, the new knowledge worker's role is running the orchestra instead of playing the piano, which
Hmm.
I love. I mean, of course, I'm an ex musician and, been involved in that forever. So it resonates with me, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I want my workers to be able to orchestrate activities across lots of agents versus doing something on their own, like playing the piano. But could you elaborate on that a little bit and maybe give us some examples of how AI, reshapes knowledge work in ways that augment rather than replace? Because there's been a lot of hype around, oh, it's coming for your knowledge worker job and that sort of
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about one thing that actually almost is out there from Apple, and it's a really good paper that they're like just published about 3 or 4 weeks ago about deductive reasoning and the
thing.
capability of LLMs today to really perform true deductive reasoning, right? So the thing that I started saying after that is like LLMs are not Sherlock. right? And it's I think I might actually sort of just coin that phrase on LinkedIn or something. But the idea behind that is, we can go, and obviously that will improve over time, but we can go to X place today in terms of quality outcome, research and analysis. That's going to be pretty good. You're like 80-90% of the way there. So 80-90% of the tedious work is gone, right? Let's take the example, we talk about the BA example, or somebody who's a knowledge worker who's actually focused on the core knowledge data of the company, like a BA. And instead of doing all the tedious work that they have to do, which by the way, they hate as well, right?
Right.
They can now have, a platform like Momba, for example, do that for them. But then somebody still needs to curate it. That's where they're running the orchestra comment comes in. So they don't have to play the piano. They don't have to highlight and press every key on that document that they might have received from a client or internally has been created, and they're new to that document. They can sort of go through and get the knowledge universe given to them, and they can make decisions based on that. And I think that's where it's going to go. And you're not going to survive that transition by becoming a prompt engineer. What you're gonna survive that transition by shaping your view on how you work. You
Right.
work this way. It was a comfortable place, right? And you meaning any knowledge worker, right? They worked in a particular manner, which was a lot of the effort they put in to get to an outcome or a decision for someone else to even make was the tedious effort, the manual labor that they did. Knowledge labor, right? This was reading documents, highlighting, pulling insights out from instinct, intuition, writing, like in the case of a BA, writing stories and requirements and doing meetings and taking notes and so on and so on and so on. Like that's sort of manual labor. No one likes to do that.
Yeah.
I've had, I can actually say I've had hundreds of product managers and business and analyst people work for me in one shape or way or form, throughout my career, because I've been on the innovation side of things for, 25 years now. But none of them loved doing that part, right? What they did really always aspire to was hey, how can I get this stuff somehow in a way where I can be the person who's actually able to go to the executive team, the stakeholders, the people who are in charge, who need this data to be able to make decisions or want to rely on me to be able to do that and get this done fast, not spend all my time on this, so I'll never have time to actually get to that level of thinking and make decisions. There's two, I'm going long on this answer, but it's important. There's two pieces of real value on a career level from that. One is you immediately raised your sort of value to the company in a whole different way. Because as a leader, I'm a CEO of a company and I've been in executive roles and founding roles for a very long time now. And, where I fail with leaders is where I don't have leaders that can make decisions. And where the organization in tiers fails is where at every level, good decisions can't be made without freedom and responsibility. But now, and the thing that stops that is getting everybody on the same page and having them get to the point where you can trust them with the knowledge. This is the opportunity for the knowledge workers to raise that level and get to that point where leaders can trust them to do that. And the leaders can actually focus on the business versus being in the business, right? So that's huge. The other thing something like this does, which is a second point, is from a leadership point of view, and this was literally something that we were talking about 2 days ago at Momba. Once I have my knowledge universe, which is really a Momba thing, but let's just say I have a lot of my data graphed and I have my knowledge universe and I understand the real world about my company, and I can sort of ask for participation in that process to continue to add to that knowledge universe. I have the truth, the core truth of what actually happened in every interaction, what's actually going on. I have conversational analytics. I no longer have to go, and not that it's a trust issue, but I no longer have blinders on in terms of what's actually going on at the ground level. Right? There's been shows made about this. I think that's like the CEO. I can't remember the name of the show, but this a reality show, right? Like the CEO goes to one of their locations and fakes as somebody who's just been hired as a worker and then sees what's actually happening. Why does that concept even exist? Because the CEO just can't get visibility, right? This changes that paradigm from a value point of view. So I don't even know if I answered your question, but those are my thoughts.
No, well, that's good. Well, and I mean, if you think about that ability to just have conversations with the data and take that and use that to gain this broader picture of what everybody's doing, it does create a different transparency layer from an executive perspective. So
it's huge, and that's exactly what we're talking about. Like that's how we run, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me. Well, so we mentioned agent frameworks a little bit. So I want to, let's help the audience understand a little bit better about agent framework, bringing capabilities, unique capabilities to an application. And then how does this, this idea of modular, versatile, how does that help with making the AI design problem more manageable?
Yeah. So if you're endeavoring to build some kind of a platform capability that then can be used for multiple different applications, and I don't mean in the traditional sense applications, let's call it use cases in the organization, right? You sort of have to, again, go back to the same agent frameworks, like, for example, Crew, or you're just going, using LangChain and LangGraph directly, right? Help you get there faster. So there's a continuous amount of innovation that make delegation and all of the orchestration around agents easier, right? And we can get into the technical conversation about that, but let's just sort of say it, like, keep it there, right? And then, well, you just don't know what the use case will be next.
Right.
It's very hard to predict every use case, unless, again, you're building a fit for purpose COTS application that does one thing. I personally believe, though, that in 5 to 10 years, the fit for purpose COTS application, other than with some very specific core things like accounting and other things, right, that just have to be mundane linear processing, based on rules, regulations, so on, from a knowledge work point of view, are slowly going to fade into, well, I just come here and I do the thing I need to do that day, and I don't know what I'm going to need to do the next day. So, like, I just call it a project and I just do this thing. And, well, how do you solve that? You can't really solve that in a predictable fashion, because you can't just sort of build a bunch of microservices and connect them together and go, like, this is the flow. This is always going to be the flow. Every time you interact with it, it's going to be the flow. The workflow is the same. We've made it more sufficient, like all the workflow platform things that you think about. So that's how everybody works. And then you know what, we can make that more efficient. We'll drop RPA into it. And a robot will do it for you. Well, that's great. Like, and that works. Like, even, think about UiPath, and they're even taking an agentic approach now, right? That works. But what really works and what really happens in the real world is every day as an organization, or every month, or every week, you have some kind of a small piece of work to do, a project to do, or something else that doesn't look like the last thing you had to do 20 times over, other than these transactional systems that log things as systems of record on purpose. How do you solve that unstructured work? And that's where you need the modular Lego blocks of capabilities in a platform to be able to apply them to the use cases as needed. So, and that's coming together in real time. So now you have a new thing to do, and you're going, well, I need to create a presentation with using conversational analytics. I want to create a presentation that is, and document generation, those would be 2 Lego blocks. I want to create a presentation for my board that talks about my strategy, which, by the way, you have my strategy, unstructured strategy data graph, so you can tell me about that, and I'll tell you the questions. And then I also want to add, performance charts on XYZ because you've graphed my transactional data. Just do it. Sure, you might do it 75% of the way, but that 75% is a huge savings in time.
Oh, yeah.
Right, to where I'm actually going to get. I mean, I literally, when we have to write a document in Momba, that's how we start. I literally did this for a bunch of documents that we have to put together, right? In the same way, I created a prompt because I happen to know how to create a prompt, right?
Right.
I fed a bunch of documentation to Mamba, and I said, okay, now you have my knowledge universe of this document. Do this for me, and it needs to have these things, and it just went and created the document for me, right? And that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And that's an unstructured use case. You can't just have that use case be predicted.
Yeah, it's interesting if we talked about composable for a while and no code, low code platforms, that sort of thing. And I think that's an acknowledgement that for a while we've known that there's a level of thing that is routine. It's something we can automate, decision intelligence and RPA, those kinds of things, right? We can get rid of those things. But then there's this other thing that changes every day. And that's actually where the value from the human comes from, is the ability to adapt to the changing thing, apply whatever tools they have to get to a certain point, but then do the rest themselves. So whatever that gap is, 10%, 25%, that's where the real value comes from what they're providing to the organization, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the ServiceNow space for a very long time. I sort of met ServiceNow when they had, and started working with them and actually advising them on their technology advisory board, or, customer cab that they used to call from a technology point of view, when they had like 79, 80 people at the company, right?
Yeah.
And they were amazing, right? As an APaaS, application platform as a service. Citizen development is what Fred used to say, right? And it was a very passionate thing for him and very passionate thing for me too. And I did this for a while, led me to build the largest ISV together with someone else on the ServiceNow platform because of that. And the proposition was clear. Hey, you have to do something in an organization, there's an app for that. What we're saying now is, well, yes, if it's predictable and it's transactional, it's like manufacturing, it happens every single day. Sure, there's an app for that. Right. But if it's just everything else, you don't need an app for that. Right. And that's where Mamba is going. You don't need an app for that. Just come and do this. Right. So
I mean, even in coding, I was talking to a CEO of a company long ago, and he grew up through the development ranks, so he's very interested in this and doing some experiments internally about it. And I said, how do you think the fact that I can go in with a tool with good prompts, I can get a code base that I can then work on, tweak, make it, and saves me tons of time. And so what does the developer look like in the future? And his statement I thought was really interesting. And it kind of goes back to your, orchestra conductor versus piano player, right? It's the same idea that the new age of developer or engineer has to be in the conceptual piece of the work, right? So what do you want it to do and how should it do that? Then the actual nuts and bolts of making it create code that does that, you don't have to worry about, because that's routine. That's something that but the hard part's the definitions, right? What do I want it to do?
Yeah, I mean, I've got Mamba behind me and we keep talking about Mamba, but like a lot of the stuff that we're talking about is literally the kind of things that we're trying to solve from an unstructured work point of view. So use this example, right? I'm a product manager and I need to work on a bunch of stories, or I need to create a new system. Like, I work in a published company. I need to create a marketing company. I need to create a new website concept for a customer to presentation. I really wanted to be interactive. I wanted to be able to, show it to them like it's their website already done, right?
Yeah.
So I go and like, how do I start? Well, I'm gonna go first to their website. I go to the customer and ask them for the CSS file, right? And I'm gonna go browse their website, read articles about them, understand their company, so I can actually really be knowledgeable. And then I'm going to go ahead and talk to my developers, and we're gonna create a little website. They're gonna write all the code, and we're gonna have a little thing standing up, and they'll sort of like do this, right? Or I can go into a platform, a la the one behind me, right? And I can actually say, hey, can you go and get all of the information and graph it from the client's website, which is public, right? It's just research. I'm reading the website like any user would that logged in, like that just went directly. Graph all of that knowledge for me, pick up their branding, right? and I'm going to give you X, Y, and Z sort of on what I'm really focusing on in terms of value that I want them to see from a
Mhm.
presentation point of view from my company. You already have the graph of my company and what I do, right? Because I'm using it. Now actually generate for me an actual, plan for how
Mhm.
I should present this and what the website should contain. Okay, that's great.
Mm.
Then I take that and I go right back to it and go like, okay, now go ahead and give me all the HTML,
Yeah.
right? Because you already have the brand effects and everything else.
Mhm.
And then I give those to my developers, and yes, sure, they have to go host it somewhere, but like literally, that's an unstructured piece of work. And what's funny is that as we are doing demos for our customers, right, starting Q1, Q2 or so, when we get out of a bit more of stealth mode,
Mm.
that's how we're going to be doing them, right?
Yeah.
So it just makes sense, and that's a little use case that is completely taken, like it incorporates the knowledge work from somebody who's the orchestrator to getting to the actual tedious thing that actually looks like something that you can use to a very successful impression
Mm.
made on the client.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it does give the capability to leverage all these different tools,
Mhm.
but you're doing it in a way through an application that's manageable to you. And I got to tell you, I particularly like this, and I'm going to steal it, the idea of structured and unstructured work. And I think that makes people see that much more easily than some of the
Yeah,
other ways we try to describe knowledge work, because that really is
yeah,
the idea. And over time, the structure can move up because you can structure more things and make them more predictable and transparent, but there's still that layer across the top where the real strategic competitive advantage is in your company, that
yeah,
allows you to adapt every day, to be flexible every day to what's happening around you.
yeah.
That's really
Other than
interesting.
tactical transactional decisions,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, which don't really have an effect on the company in the grand scheme of things.
Mm.
There's never been a decision I've seen made at a company towards outcomes that's actually based on pure transactional data or structured data.
Mm.
Because it's not even that, it's the analytics of that actually somebody looks at,
Right.
right?
Right.
That data is very important and
Mm.
is critical for actually feeding into the graph of the universe of knowledge that
Mm.
allows you to do the unstructured work. But all those decisions are made by someone who does some unstructured work to get there.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, so just to take a quick detour, because we were talking about this a little bit before the show started, and I'm just curious of your position, and I will say thank you for sharing what you have shared about Mumbai. I know you're still in stealth, and and so I
Yeah.
respect that they're you're still in motion there, but I know that you're also raising money and doing all the typical things a startup does at this stage. And I just read a stat the other day that 40% of the VC money this year had gone to AI startups. And I just react to that. I'm just curious what you think about that from what you're seeing as you're actually out doing this.
I have been having multiple conversations around this subject with multiple people,
Mm.
right? Several people. And, you have to have the right long term idea, of course. You have to have a very sustainable as well as thought through market and sales and
Mhm.
distribution
Right.
strategy. But I feel that the amount of money that's going to go into AI, especially the application layer,
Mhm.
right, is going to only increase in percentage in terms of the total, right, spend, right?
Mhm.
The competing technology trends against this, against agentic AI or AI, are what? Blockchain,
Mm.
crypto,
Oh, yeah.
like break the bank type of stuff, right? Blockchain,
Yeah.
crypto, and quantum computing.
Quantum. Yep. Yep.
Quantum computing is far away. Like it's still lab work, right? Uh, Blockchain, I think there's going to be companies and there's some that are doing that already, that combine agentic AI and blockchain into real value props, like
Mhm.
huge value props, right? Um, but the AI has such an impact. So, for example, like when I have to describe, I'll give you an example. When I have to describe the TAM for Mamba to someone, and this sounds almost facetious, and go like, okay, well, so you're building a platform. Okay, so like, who does it apply to? Well, actually, because of what we're doing at the very core as a platform, we're going to build use case-based, very specific capabilities as we go along to hit specific markets and personas. But at the end of the day, I'm not industry specific. I will be at some point. But really, actually, the TAM is every company in the world, right? And that's the truth for agentic AI. So I think the TAM is
Yeah.
so large
Yeah.
that it's very, very difficult to say that more funding is not going to go into it. Now, if it's all that funding is going to be successful, like the internet
Mm.
boom, not sure. But I really also think that the people that I talk to, the questions that they ask, they're not just jumping in to throw money, right?
Yeah.
They're asking like logical questions, like what's your
Yeah.
strategy? Are you a widget? What's your IP? What's your moat when you actually grow up, right? If I
Right.
gave this money to someone else, why couldn't they seed you? Like the questions that I'm getting, the questions, and we have good answers for those, but like the questions that we're getting
Mm.
are good questions, the questions you
Yeah.
expect from a responsible investor,
Yeah. I
right?
mean, it's like this cycle is just repeating itself, right? I mean, even if you just look at kind of software in general, how did we go? Well, the money at first was hardware because that was hard. And then
Yeah.
once that wasn't hard, where'd the money go? It went to database because that was hard. But then once
Yes.
that came to a certain point, then where'd the money go? Went to applications because that's where the real value creation was.
Yeah.
But until you solve those other pieces, you couldn't get to the point of the
You couldn't,
application.
and a lot of money went into the frameworks, right?
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So like the frameworks that layer on top of the LLM, the agentic frameworks, for example,
Yeah.
right? Uh, and then now it's our turn. Like now the platform and application layers turn. So I think it's going to be fantastic, and I think that
Mm.
there's going to be a lot of there's going to be a lot of success stories, and there's going to be many sort of intermediate, businesses, and there's going to be some failures as well. I do actually think that there's going to be a lot of competitors, and I think that's good.
Yeah.
That's good in
Yeah.
this market.
Yeah. I mean, especially as we're in that, phase where you see the explosion of innovation around all the new types of things you can do.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious about this and we're running short on time, but I did want to kind of take a bit of a look towards the future. And I'm just curious, what do you think, based on what we know right now, at least, what are the most exciting areas of AI application innovation over the next few years? And as you advise, prospects and customers, what should organizations be thinking about to prepare for that?
So, I mean, I think we covered a little bit of this in terms of the exciting area of innovation is obviously the
Yep.
application and platform layer, right?
Yep.
I think what comes underneath that and then is like how you're getting to that. And this is where I will say less because there's some secret sauce to that, but like, how you approach it, um, because we're stealth, but like, I think what's going to be exciting for companies and what they actually have to focus on is not adopting widgets that then they end up like the death of agentic adoption in your environment will be you have a widget for everything, because and then what happens is you have a platform for nothing. Right. So
Fair.
you have something that does this little thing and something that does this little thing and something that does, and they're all agentic.
Yeah.
They all do that one little thing really well, but that's all they do,
Yeah.
right? And you have no pull with those, partners or vendors to actually do anything more than that.
Mm.
And what you end up with is a hodgepodge of data, and you don't have a knowledge universe. You don't have the capability to actually
Right.
get strategic value out of it. You don't have the ability to get it adopted across the company. And you have to integrate all of that. And now you're in the old age, 1990s to 2015
Right.
integration, and actually there's articles about like the age of agentic integration. Like I fear when I see that word because that just means complexity, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
phrase.
Yeah.
So, one of the advices
Mm.
that I give is to not necessarily just jump on the next little thing that you can buy with a credit card.
Yeah.
Take
Yeah.
the
I mean,
long-term approach.
it's interesting because I mean, if you think about the way that things have evolved in kind of in the startup world or in the tech world for a long time, right? You have companies that create features that they sell as a product, and then you
Yeah.
have other companies that have come at it from a platform, and eventually they end up as the acquirer to aggregate all those other features and functions just to save themselves development time or to
Yeah.
gain customers, because it's logical to see it in the whole, but in the little pieces, you just create data silos and spend lots of money, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, we obviously look at a lot of like this stuff and do research, and we often see widgets, and we go, that's kind of cool what they did with that.
Yeah.
And, but that's all they do.
Yep.
Hmm. Oh, that's just a feature in our roadmap.
That's a feature. Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because we're a platform, right?
Yeah.
So it's like that approach. Like, it's very interesting. And what that does is that company is eventually going to run out of gas in terms of actually being able to compete,
Yep.
unless they take the hard, like we're taking a hard, long approach. Like, we're even doing stealth. Like, there's a lot of work and effort and investment that goes into that.
Yeah.
And you don't get immediate revenue because you're doing that.
Right.
Um, and but they're addicted to the credit card revenue, and then eventually, right? Um, an organization is gonna go and go like, yeah, like, it's as easy it is as to buy in a PLG motion, which, by the way, we'll probably have one too, but it'll be a different
Sure.
market,
Sure.
right? The churn is also that easy.
Yep.
You get seeded really fast. You
Yep.
really can't focus on customer success, right?
Yeah.
So somebody who's going to do this well for companies has to focus on customer success, in delighting customers, traditional NPS, and making sure that they actually have the platform and modular capabilities to
Right.
deliver use cases for those customers.
Right. Right. And actually be able to expand that. That's the unstructured piece of it, right? Because it's
Yeah,
unstructured, you have to have this capability to adapt to whatever that unstructured thing is that they have to get done. Yeah. That.
and let customers innovate on your platform,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
not developing, but just using it for different things and telling you,
Right.
I just did this other thing in your platform.
Mhm.
And you go like, I never imagined you would do that, but what, did it work? Yeah, it works 70% of the way. Or we can make it 100% better.
Mhm.
Is that something everybody would use, right? Like,
Yeah.
you don't get that with a widget.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Well, the great conversation, Asim, and I really appreciate it. I think we're running out of time, and so I there is one thing I always like to ask at the end, and that's, just for the audience to say, could you recommend somebody, a thought leader or a book that you've read recently that you think would help them in their quest to understand, what's going on here and grow?
Uh, you know, um, I don't have an AI related book off the top of my head. And the reason for that is I feel like there's so much information
Yeah.
on that you can gain, you sort of, you can feed yourself on in bits and bytes. And I have a little bit of ADD, which I like that a lot, right? I
Mhm.
like that
Me too.
medium a lot, like podcast. I mean,
Yep.
I'll say one thing, like, I would listen to Michael Fauscette's past podcast. A little plug for you, right?
Hey, I
Right,
appreciate the plug.
right, right. But I think I'll sort of shift the question to a little bit different. I'm sure
Sure.
there's going to be people on listening to this podcast that are thinking about joining,
Mhm.
or thinking about building a business in this space, because is obviously a feverish thing right now. Companies are not just built with a good idea. Companies are not just built with some amazing algorithm you figured out. You get a patent. The last 15 years, it just
Yep.
prevents bad people from doing bad things. It doesn't really give you the moat that you actually need to have.
Alright.
Companies are not built with all of those widgety things and all that, like, and chasing after revenue and all those things. Those are important. Like, you obviously have to have numbers and all that. But companies are built with culture. And one of the books that most people think is very controversial, but I love, around culture, that I think everybody who's going to start a company should actually read before they start one,
Mm,
or as they're starting one, is Netflix No Rules Rules.
mm. Yeah,
And I
yeah,
make everybody who's a leader that works for me read that book. Now, we don't sort of take everything from it and just apply it, but
mhm,
there's concepts in there like freedom and responsibility
yep,
that really matter for actually being successful. Like, concepts like freedom to take risks, freedom to fail, freedom to learn,
Yeah.
responsibility if you're avoiding that learning process, right? And getting that live 360 feedback. So that's the
Mm.
book that I would recommend that people read. I know it's not an AI book, but it's just a thing that I really love to plug. So
You know what? No, I think I appreciate that, and I think that's a great recommendation. And honestly, I get all sorts of interesting recommendations, and a lot of them aren't AI related. Although I have had people recommend reading EU government regulations on AI, which I think is maybe a step far. But I mean, whatever. Anyway, well,
I'm gonna,
Asim,
I'll have
thanks.
Mamba. I'll have Mamba. Get all
Yeah.
the insights out for me on that.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what I did when I wanted to know. Believe me, it wasn't Mamba, but it was another tool, and yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, that's all the time we have, Asim, and I really appreciate you joining today. Really good conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and it was great for me too. Thank you so much for letting me be here.
And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining. Remember to hit that subscribe button. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform to help others find the show. For more on AI and other software research reports, briefs, and blog posts, check out arionresearch.com. If you have AI, generative AI, or business automation expertise, either as a provider or as an end user, email your information to disambiguation@arionresearch.com, and we'll see if we can get you on as a guest. Don't forget to join us next week. Disambiguation is an Arion Research production. I'm Michael Fauscette, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.